Ooh, hello. Greetings. My camera cover was on, so it's dark, but I'm here. Hello. My name is Anya Sanu, and you are watching Weekly Pan African News, weekly program presented to you by the New Mexico chapter of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Greetings, Max. Greetings, Logan. Greetings to all the folks watching the show. Greetings, Monica, who's just peeping that Facebook is like not letting us thrive. They used to send out a notification whenever we went live from the page, and all of a sudden it stopped mysteriously. And then also, both Monica and I were blocked from making events on the official APRP New Mexico Facebook page with like no explanation, no warning. And then plus, Hood Communists got permanently banned for Twitter. People are pressed. The people are pressed. The corporations are pressed. They don't want this revolutionary Pan African flavor in front of you. But we're gonna keep doing it. We're gonna keep persevering. So the song that was playing at the beginning of the show is by Chavanduka and Kwame Steve. It's called Ujima. But Chavanduka, the woman with like the glorious voice that you just heard, is a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. She's on the Central Committee and the African Women's Revolutionary Union. Do you understand like the kind of multi-talented people that are in the APRP? Found that album and I was like, this slaps, like this is incredible. And she's on the stage and she's brilliant. And she's like a straight up musician. But yeah, that was Ujima by Chavanduka and Kwame Steve. And you can find that whole album on YouTube for free. And you should listen to it. It's extremely energizing. Actually, I'm going to put the playlist. I'm going to put the playlist for the album. But yeah, Chavanduka is a member, a longtime member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and also a very accomplished musician in addition to being a brilliant revolutionary. But like I said, my name is Onya Samu. This is Weekly Pan African News presented to you by the New Mexico chapter of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The All African People's Revolutionary Party, or the AAPRP, is a revolutionary Pan-African socialist political party that was founded 52 years ago by Kwame Nkrumah. If you don't know the name Kwame Nkrumah, you should. He's a hero of the African Revolution. He called for the formation of the APRP in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. He was also, the first democratically elected president of Ghana after Ghana gained its independence from British colonialism after a mass people's movement. When Ghana gained its independence, he said, our independence is meaningless while the rest of Africa and the diaspora is colonized. And so he wrote the handbook. He wrote Class Struggle in Africa. He wrote Africa Must Unite. He's one of the forefathers of Pan-Africanism. And so that's why we're here, because of Kwame Nkrumah. But we do the show every single Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. We've been doing it for about a year. It's over a year now. It's kind of wild because we started in March of 2020. We started it back at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic because we quickly realized that our people, the masses of African people, were going to be at particularly high risk of getting severely ill and experiencing serious complications to their livelihood if we brought them together in person. So we started doing this show virtually. It's one of many, many, many ways that New Mexico chapter adapted to the conditions of the COVID-19 pandemic. But we are very happy to do the show every week. We're really grateful for the recurring audience members that we have, and we appreciate y'all. So we always start off the show with an intro that's made up of 3 things. The first thing I did a little intro. I'm Moni Song. This is the APRP. That's the program. The second thing we always do is we want to call in an ancestor. And the reason why we do that is because we understand as revolutionary African people that we are part of a continuum of struggle that began centuries ago, that began the very first moment, very first European colonizers set foot on the shores of Africa looking to loot, steal, and enslave and rape. So we understand that we are not reinventing the wheel. We are building upon a struggle that has existed for centuries, which means our ancestors laid the groundwork for us to do this work today. Our ancestors made it possible for us to be here, period, point blank. So we would be remiss if we did not celebrate them in the platforms that we have, if we did not tell the truth about revolutionary African ancestors, because we know this capitalist imperialist system is not going to. So that is why we call in an ancestor. And the ancestor we would like to call in today is a revolutionary African woman. The whole show is going to be about revolutionary African women. But the sister that we're calling in today is Hosina Machel, who is a member of the MPLA. Today, we honor the revolutionary militant Hosina Uthiba Machel. She was part of the leadership of Frelimo, not MPLA, Frelimo, the Frente de Liberación de Mozambique, or the Mozambique Liberation Front. And she was instrumental in the fight against colonialism and the struggle for national independence from Portugal. There were thousands, maybe millions of names of African women who have given their lives for the liberation of Africa. And today more than ever, it is important to share their stories, to understand why it is the duty of women to fight on every front and on every battlefield for our liberation, and more importantly, to complete the revolution. The ancestor we honor today is Josina Machel. Long live the revolutionary spirit of our sister, Josina Machel. So, I was the ancestor. I did it fast. I had a pre-prepared text that I read because I'm trying to be more organized. The next thing that we always do in the intro, thing 3 of 3, is that we want to recognize that we are speaking to y'all from stolen land. I am speaking to y'all from occupied Tiwa territory. Spanish colonizers gave it the name Albuquerque. It was named after a raggedy-ass duke. But in reality, this land belongs to the Tiwa Nation. It will always belong to the Tiwa Nation. The Tiwa Nation is still here, and the Tiwa Nation is fighting to get their land back. Albuquerque, and indeed the entirety of the Western Hemisphere, quite a bit of Africa, occupied Palestine, occupied Australia, are all occupied Ireland, are all examples of lands that were stolen from indigenous peoples. And when we say land back, we are not speaking metaphorically. We are speaking literally when we say land back in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Land was taken in Africa, in Palestine, in Australia, in the United States, and throughout Central and South America, and land must be returned. So I'm speaking to y'all from occupied Tiwa territory. The Tiwa Nation will get their land back, just like Africans all over the world will get our land back in Africa. So that was the intro. 3 parts, all 3 done. Now we march to the next part of the show. We do this every single episode. We always have a component of political education. You're just straight up not going to find an AAPRP event, no matter where it's held in the world, no matter who is holding it, without some component of political education. We are a propaganda party. We are seeking to raise the consciousness of the masses of our people. And political education is how we do that. Political education is how we share the correct history of the African liberation struggle. Political education is how we develop our critical thinking skills and our ability to struggle collectively. Political education is essential to any revolutionary movement. You point blank cannot have a revolution that's going to win without systematic, organized political education for everybody to develop them into revolutionaries. Also, someone's telling me the broadcast is interrupted. Hope it's not. It looks fine from my end. Everything's green. I need more details. If you are, I guess, yeah, let us know in the comments if you're having issues seeing, or if this car mat is just having interest. Yeah, Bird says I'm good on YouTube, so I'm gonna keep going. So yeah, political education, essential. Every revolutionary struggle must have political education. This week, the PE topic, PE stands for political education. I'm trying to be careful with the acronyms, explain them every time. But this week's political education topic is women and the African liberation struggle. Women and the African liberation struggle. Obviously a subject that is very dear to my heart as a revolutionary African woman who is a member of a Pan-African political party. But also a subject that is foundational to understanding how the struggle for African liberation will be won and how African revolution will be raised. I'm going to open this conversation with a quote from Sekou Touré, who was the president of Guinea after Guinea gained independence from France. Sekou Touré says, "The freedom and development of the African women are indispensable to the freedom and emancipation of the African people. The freedom and development of the African women are indispensable to the freedom and emancipation of African people." Once again, that was Sekou Touré, president of Free Guinea after it gained its liberation from France. Also one of the ideological forefathers of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. But what Sekou Touré is basically saying in that quote is that no struggle for African liberation, no African revolution, period, no struggle for Pan-Africanism as an objective can ever be won without putting the liberation of African women at the forefront. At the forefront, like as a mainline priority. And the reason why I'm emphasizing that is because now in draggy-ass 2020, where everybody's moving to the right, there is a strain of thought that says that the struggle against patriarchy, the struggle for the liberation of women and marginalized genders and queer folks, the struggle for the liberation of intersecting oppressions has to wait until after the class struggle, has to wait until some indeterminate point, quote unquote, after the revolution. I have heard that so many times that we can't focus on patriarchy, we can't focus on gender oppression, we can't focus on intersecting oppression, because we have to focus on like the so-called main struggle, the struggle against class, the struggle for national liberation, But what Secretary says very, very, very clearly in that quote, the freedom to development of the African women are indispensable to the freedom and the emancipation of the African people, is that it's not going to happen that way. There is no such thing as the revolution happens and then we'll work on liberating women. It's just not going to happen that way. It has to happen concurrently. Concurrently, we have to struggle against patriarchy and against gender-based oppression at the same time that we are waging the struggle against colonialism and the struggle against capitalism. It must happen concurrently. And if you look at the history of revolutionary anti-colonial struggles across Africa, across the diaspora, across the colonized world, you see in place after place after place, whether it's in Guinea-Bissau, whether it's in Cuba, whether it's in Vietnam, that those struggles actually were waged concurrently and successfully. The PIGC, under the leadership of Amilcar Cabral, straight up said that women were equal to men. They're going to be in the front line. They're going to be in leadership roles. And that went against everything Portuguese colonizers have built within the mindset of Africans in Guinea-Bissau. And they still did that shit. They still won over the masses to the correct line of struggling concurrently against patriarchy and gender-based oppression during the revolution against colonialism and capitalism. So when someone tells me that the struggle against patriarchy has to wait until after the revolution, that is a person who I know off top does not read and is full of shit. Anywho, so why is it that African women are oppressed under the system of capitalism and colonialism? Why is it that the struggle for African liberation must be fought concurrently with the struggle against patriarchy and gender-based oppression? Well, I'm going to introduce y'all to a concept known as triple oppression. Triple oppression is a term coined by Claudia Jones, who was a revolutionary African woman, a Marxist, who lived in Britain, and also founded Carnival in Britain, I found out the other day. But triple oppression, as described by Claudia Jones, basically means that African women and marginalized genders as well are oppressed on the basis of our nation, our class, and our gender, our nation or our race. You can think about it as our race, by class and by our gender. And that this condition of triple oppression is like the default position for the masses of African people all around the world. We face triple oppression as workers, as African people, but also as women and marginalized genders like non-binary folks. So if we understand that, then we can use that lens of triple oppression to analyze the condition of the masses of African women and marginalized genders across the world. You can say, okay, what does it mean to be oppressed as a worker, as an African, and as a woman? What does that look like? Well, let's look at the example, for example, single mothers, single African mothers under a capitalist society. There's probably no group of people that is more denigrated, not just by the oppressor, not just by the ruling class, but within their own communities than single African mothers. Despite the fact that these women represent the backbone of multiple revolutionary organizations, like the most principled, consistent, and revolutionary, frankly, comrades that I have in the African People's Revolutionary Party are overwhelmingly single motherfucking mothers who like will bring their kids to meetings and be taking notes or facilitating, who are showing up day after day after day, early in the morning, late at night, when childless people are nowhere to be found. when childless men, childless women are nowhere to be found, these women are showing up consistently. But if you look at their condition under capitalism, you see poverty, you see exploitation, you also see rhetoric that dehumanizes them, that like deems them somehow morally unfit, that says because they are a woman with a child and no man in the picture, that somehow they are less than. There's like, I am a single person, and so unfortunately, I have to be on dating apps. I'm on Tinder and all that other bullshit. It's very depressing. But the reason why it's depressing is because so often you will find these like random fuck shit dudes who will have in their profile like some like little dig at single mothers. I was like swiping, and it's like, dude, I don't know, he's just like a regular ass dude, worked at a retail store, like nothing like, I'm not trying to shit on him for working at a retail store, but dude, you're not like a catch. So he was like, at the end, he was like, no more profile, and then at the end, he was like, you're not a catch, otherwise he wouldn't have left you and the kids. And I was like, some mom is just fucking minding her business, trying to find a gentleman caller or a person to hang out with, And this dude who works at rent, like, you're not better than her. You're both poor. You dude takes it out of his, like, goes out of his way to, like, cut her down a size. Never met her before, doesn't know anything about her. He's just internalized the dehumanizing rhetoric about single mothers, particularly single African mothers in this society, and has taken it upon himself to cut them down to size in the fucking 500 characters he has in his Tinder profile. And that's just like one example of the way that these women, who again are the backbone of communities, are the backbone of revolutionary organizations, are considered within a capitalist and colonial system. They are raising generations of revolutionaries in the modern day. They are doing like an incredible juggling act by supporting families by themselves and raising like good principled kids, and they get shit on consistently because of patriarchy and because of this concept of triple oppression on the best basis of nation, class, and gender. Because there's there's wealthy African or European women, right, who are single mothers, who are like celebrated, who are like, women doing it for themselves, who are like held up, and that's like not a big deal. But if you're a poor or working class African woman with a child and no man in the picture, people will just shit on you reflexively, even other women. That's one example of the condition that African women face under this concept of triple oppression. So capitalism in general spreads lies about African women. Point blank lies are spread about African women under the system of capitalism. I gave one example, which is like the objective reality of single African mothers being revolutionaries, being backbones of the community, compared with the way they're discussed. But there are so many other stereotypes and projections and characterizations of African women within a capitalist society, such as the idea that we are either extremely angry and manly and uncontrollable, or Jezebels, wanton, bloody, always looking for it, don't even worry about consent because we're always open for business. That kind of attitude projected upon African women that you can see in the way that people talk about, I hate celebrity-centered analysis, but the way that people talk about, for example, like Megan Thee Stallion, or really like, any African woman that has that body type that just exists in that body in the world gets like sexualized images projected upon her, gets like sexualized attitudes projected upon her on a constant motherfucking basis. Can you tell I'm talking from experience? Can you tell? I go out of my way to not be flirty with people, and it comes off as very cold. Because if I let myself show any of that on any level, then people are going to be like, oh, you want dick, oh, you want to fuck, or sexualize me in some way that I did not ask for. That's just like a default day-to-day experience as an African woman within a capitalist society. There's all these like stereotypes and projections and assumptions that are put onto your body by the broader society, which is white supremacist and patriarchal, that you are just forced to fucking navigate. You're just forced to navigate. So I'm actually like a very friendly and flirty person, but I fucking suppress that shit because I don't want to fucking deal with it. So yeah, the capitalist system constantly spreads lies about African women, says we're lazy, says we're slutty, says we're angry, says we're manly, all kinds of things to provide a after the fact justification for that condition of triple oppression, for that condition of exploitation. It wants to keep us poor. It wants to keep us down. It wants to keep our children criminalized and take them away from our homes. And so it has to spread lies about who we are and how we exist in the world in order to justify all these actions of oppression and exploitation under capitalism. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So these are some of the lies that capitalist system spreads about African women. But like I said, the truth about African women is that if we are poor and working class, if we are centered in our community, we are consistent, we are principled, we are indispensable comrades. Like I said, some of the most badass people that I work with day to day in the All African People's Revolutionary Party are single mothers who are doing that shit, who are taking care of kids on their own while also building revolutions, while also building the organization. When someone like tries to compare me, like people do this all the time, especially like dudes that are trying to hit on you. They try to be like, oh, you're not like other women. These women are like loose and these women are stuck up and these women are blah, blah, blah. And so they'll try to be like, you're different. That happens to me all the motherfucking time. I think because I do that reserve thing, people assume that I feel a kind of way, or I feel like the way they do, that I internalize patriarchy they do. So they'll be like, oh, you're not like those other women, you're good, or you're like one of the good ones. And like, it reminds me of that quote, the way it makes me feel Reminds me of that quote by Eugene Debs, who was like that European socialist in the United States. And he was like, if there was like a lower class, I'm of it. If there's like a criminal class, I'm of it. Like, I'm not better than any working class person. I feel like that. And I also feel like when it comes to hoes, when it comes to strippers, when it comes to like so-called loose women, when it comes to like the women that are like projected upon and sexualized and like shit on and poor, I am those women. I am not better than them. I am the same level as like the lowest considered African women under this motherfucking system. Don't ever put me up here compared to like the single mothers who are doing kind of work that I could not even conceive of. I have no children. I have no dependents. I can dedicate my entire life to the revolution and no one's going to lose out. But these mothers are able to balance raising children, oftentimes doing extremely exploitative labor at the same time as they're building revolution. So no one's ever going to tell me that I'm supposed to be better than a single mother. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You know how many organizations would fall the fuck apart without single mothers? You know how many organizations would fall the fuck apart without sex workers? You know how many organizations would fall the fuck apart without hustlers? You understand? You understand these hierarchies of which women are acceptable? We're just created by the system that oppresses us. And so I reject it. I reject it. So I do want to say, you know, capitalism spreads lies about African women that specifically targets poor and working class African women. The capitalist system spreads these lies that dehumanize those women, that rationalizes their exploitation and their oppression. That's absolutely the case. And the truth is, of course, that many of those women are revolutionaries. Many of those women are pillars of their community. Many of those women are supporting children beyond their own, like feeding entire neighborhoods. Like, that's a common occurrence in African communities across the world, not just in the United States. So that's like, there's lies that the capitalist system tells, and there's truth about the reality of African women. But what I do want to mention is that even though poor and working class African women get the smoke from the system and from the community as a whole, the reality situation is that the African women that are doing the dirt are not poor working class African women. It's not the sex workers. It's not the strippers. It's not the mothers. It's not the people living in poverty. It's not the folks on food stamps. Those are not the African women that are the motherfucking problem. There are a segment of African women that are a motherfucking problem. I wrote an article about it 2 weeks ago called African Women Don't Be a Mammy for Empire. And the group of African women I was talking about is petty bourgeois African women. Petty bourgeois African women. Middle managers. Academics. Government employees. People like Kamala Harris. People like Linda Thomas Greenfield, who's the UN ambassador, or the US ambassador to the UN, who used to work for fucking AFRICOM. People like Michelle Obama. People like Beyonce. People like Condoleezza Rice. These petty bourgeois African women. These oftentimes wealthy African women who are usually married. Usually to an African. They fulfill every single box that capitalism sets up that we're supposed to check for being respectable women. These petty bourgeois African women that check all these dumbass respectable boxes are also occupying positions of political leadership within the motherfucking US government, within the US empire, and they use those positions to brutally oppress their own people and other poor and colonized peoples around the world. Kamala Harris is held up as someone that I should aspire to as an African woman. She's respectable. She wears suits with dumbass Converse sneakers. She has a nice little silk press. She's the first African vice president of the United States. She's in some stupid ass sorority full of other petty bourgeois people. She's like a respectable model of an African woman. This is what I'm told, right? But Kamala Harris, the reason she got to where she is she worked as a motherfucking pig. She worked as an attorney general and a district attorney in the state of California. And in that position, she laughed about jailing single African mothers, poor and working class African mothers who are trying to get their kids to school. She criminalized sex workers. She put trans African women, poor trans African women sex workers in men's prisons. This respectable, petty bourgeois African woman who has this position of leadership, who I'm supposed to look up to, is shitting all over the masses of her people domestically and now in the capacity of vice president on a global fucking scale. So there are African women that are in fact a problem. But it's not the hoes, it's not the single mothers, it's not the poor ones, it's the fucking petty bourgeois African women that are selling us out. And calling it girl power, calling it feminism. That shit pisses me off. I wrote a whole article about it because it makes me so angry. It makes me so, Stacey Abrams said in the chat, it makes me so angry that poor and working class African women get all the fucking smoke for random people, including other poor people, but these petty bourgeois, bougie ass African sellout women are fucking occupying positions where they are hurting thousands of people, and I'm supposed to be like, that's what I should be? No, like, the sex worker is not the problem. Kamala Harris is the problem. Stacey Abrams is the problem. Condoleezza Rice, Michelle Obama, Linda Thomas Greenfield, all these motherfucking petty bourgeois African women that are willing mouthpieces for the white supremacist ass Democratic Party. They are the fucking problem. They should be getting the smoke. Instead, the poorest, most exploited segments of African women get the fucking smoke, get judged, get shit on by everybody, including their own communities, while these women get away with murder. Literally. So I don't want to pretend that simply on the basis of occupying the identity of African women, that people are automatically progressive, that people are automatically revolutionary. The question of gender, nation, but also class is primary, because a person is fully capable of being an African woman and being reactionary as fuck. You have to look at the class position, and you have to see which class she aligns herself with, and that will tell you whether she's on the fuck shit or not. I want to celebrate poor working class African women. I want to celebrate revolutionary African women, but I do not want to essentialize the identity of African women to say that you are automatically progressive if you also are an African woman. No, we have to look at actions. We have to look at where people align themselves, and we have to look at class. So yeah, I've been watching that particular segment of person like, well, increase in prominence. Like, it started around like 2016 election with Hillary and all those motherfucking people lined up behind her. And then in this last election, when Kamala was running and Elizabeth Warren was running, they lined up between the two of them. And I was like, they just like come out more and more. And then there was like that hashtag listen to black women, but it was like implied that it was like liberal petty bourgeois black women. Because if like revolutionary African women were like smash the United States, people were like, ooh, like it's too much. But they say listen to black women if they're saying vote for Democrats. They say listen to black women if they're gonna like weaponize their identity to get out of criticism, like Kamala Harris did. But it's not listen to black women if we're talking about socialism or Pan-Africanism or anti-colonialism. I just want to call that shit out, because I see more and more people weaponizing the identity of African women and people weaponizing the concept of misogynoir to cover up for being straight up class traitors and mammies for empire. So I just want to briefly mention that. Yeah. But like I said, poor and working class African women, revolutionary African women, have always been on the front lines, whether those front lines are in our communities day to day, or whether those front lines are building the African Revolution in a context of a national liberation struggle. We also have to acknowledge and understand and internalize that smashing patriarchy and capitalism, and also African women liberating ourselves, is part of the struggle for African liberation and the struggle to win Pan-Africanism. There is no such thing as you're going to get free after the revolution. No, the revolution is going to be getting us free is going to be part of the revolution. Liberating women, smashing patriarchy, liberating queer and trans people is part of the revolution. It must happen concurrently. We talked about how colonizers, when they came to Africa, used existing contradictions like class, like gender, like so on and so forth, ability to divide and conquer us. And so in order to overcome the tactics of divide and conquer, we must build principled unity among the masses of African people, which means addressing patriarchy, which means addressing gender-based oppression, which means addressing ableism, which means addressing all the isms these people use to divide and conquer. We're going to do it concurrently as we smash capitalism. Period, point blank. African women must destroy the myth that in order for the African man to be strong, we must be weak. So many people. That's the other thing I encounter on dating sites. Maybe I'll just talk about how depressing dating is as a revolutionary African woman. But yeah, the other thing that's like very common, besides just like randomly shitting on single mothers on dating profiles, is this concept of you just having to be submissive because you have a vagina, identify as a woman. People just expect I'm just gonna be submissive to like a random dude, and so they just put that up front. And I'm just like, I am not who you are looking for. Good luck on your journey. But like this idea that in order for us to truly be women, in order for us to truly like show up in our communities, we must submit to the whims of just, I guess, like any, like the closest man to us. I don't fucking know, dog. It's just not, it's not my ministry. But within the context of a revolutionary struggle, we have to understand that we cannot have a massive portion of the population be weak for the benefit of another portion of the population. Women, kids, and marginalized genders do not have to submit themselves to men in the context of revolutionary struggle, or any context, to be honest with you. But there's, like, you know, capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy spread this idea based on European constructions of what a woman is, that women must be submissive to men. And I'm saying within the context of revolution, no. Women and marginalized genders and kids must be equal to men. Period, point blank. The masses of African people, in order to win a revolutionary struggle, in order to win an anti-colonial struggle, we need to be strong as a unit. We need to be strong as a nation. Telling African women to step back is telling African people as a whole that we have to wait for our liberation, because we need everybody strong. We need everybody fighting. We need everybody on the front line. It's like all hands on deck kind of situation that we find ourselves in. So don't tell, you know, 50% of the fucking population that's women or marginalized genders that we have to fall back for men's egos. That makes no motherfucking sense. If Amilcar Cabral had went to Guinea-Bissau and said, women, you can only raise babies, you can't fight on the front line, they would have lost that war against Portugal. He said, no, we need women leading. We need women military trained. We need women on the front lines. We need the entire population fighting for this one objective of liberation. So again, the idea that, you know, half the African population must submit itself to the other half, it's just not going to work in a revolutionary context. And I don't think it works in general. African people need to be strong to win the struggle for our liberation. The only way to deal with capitalism, the root of the lies that are spread about African women, particularly poor and working class African women, is through organizing the masses of African women and African people in general to destroy capitalism. We destroy the system that is creating those lies by organizing the masses of African people across genders for the objective of Pan-Africanism, which is one unified socialist Africa, and for the objective of liberation of our people and our lands. So within the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we of course have a women's wing, the All African Women's Revolutionary Union, the AAWRU. It was established for the purpose of recruiting African women to work for their people in the context of an organization fighting for their people. It was built specifically to develop the revolutionary capacity and the consciousness of African women within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And now we're having really cool conversations within the APRP about what it means that there are Africans that are neither men or women, who are still oppressed on the basis of gender, who are still oppressed on the basis of patriarchy, who actually do also suffer under triple oppression like African women. So what does that mean? Where's the space for them? Can the union be the space for them? Cool conversations happening about that. But the African Women's Revolutionary Union was founded in the 80s. Like I said, it was created to develop African women into principled revolutionaries on the front line of the struggle for Pan-Africanism. And as you can see by the example of the many African women and marginalized genders that you've seen repping the APRP New Mexico chapter across our programs, it's working. It's working. The AWRU turns women into bad bitches. And like I already said, that's like the highest compliment that I could particularly pay. So yeah, revolution requires the participation of every single African person. Every single African must engage in the process of individual transformation, but also in collective transformation that is a revolutionary struggle. Every single African person, regardless of gender, must be developed into a leader, must be developed into a revolutionary. I think I mentioned this on the show before. Many Marxist socialist organizations are consider themselves like vanguard parties, where it's going to be like a small group of people to lead a revolution. The APRP is Nkrumah's Toureus for Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré. Those are like the founders of our ideology. And we are not a vanguard party. We are a mass political party, meaning we are trying to organize the masses of our people for the revolutionary struggle on a mass basis. We're not trying to create like a small cadre of leaders. We are trying to create many thousands of leaders within the African liberation struggle, because we are a mass political party, which means that every single African person who is not a class traitor must be recruited into the struggle to build Pan-Africanism, must be developed into a revolutionary African person, and that includes women, that includes marginalized genders, that includes the youth alongside men. I want to read a quote from Frances Beale from When I Wear It Enter by Paula Giddings, which is a very, very good book. But just talking about what revolution means and what it's going to take and why we cannot exclude women. Let me get this quote up. So Frances Beale says, revolution entails not only the willingness to lay our lives on the firing line, to die for the revolution is a one-shot deal. To live for the revolution means taking on the more difficult commitment of changing our day-to-day patterns. This means changing the traditional routines that we have established as a result of living in a corrupted society. That again was Frances Beale. She was quoted in the book When I Wear It Enter by Paula Giddings. And what Frances Beale is basically saying in that quote is that revolution is a process of transforming society. Revolution is certainly a process of transforming the economic system, but revolution is also a process about transforming our relationships to each other, to ourselves, how we treat each other, how we show up in the world, and also our relationship to the planet. She says, it is about the more difficult commitment of changing our day-to-day patterns. This means changing the traditional routines that we have established as a result of living in a corrupted society. And so when you look at the question of patriarchy, when you look at the question of triple oppression on the basis of gender, nation, and class, you see in this quote from Frances Beale a clear way of dealing with those situations. It's not a case where you're going to wait until after the revolution, whatever the fuck that means, after the revolution to fight patriarchy. No, in order to build revolution in the first place, we have to transform the attitudes that patriarchy created. We have to transform these structures that patriarchy created. But we also have to transform the way we relate to each other as a community, and also on a one-on-one level. That means no more shitting on single mothers, no more shitting on sex workers and hoes, no more shitting on poor and working class African women simply because they are poor and working class African women. It also means respecting people's fucking pronouns, dog. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many times, big shot, revolutionary socialists, Marxists, whatever the fuck, are like, I'm too good for pronouns. I'm too good to respect basic facts about how people describe themselves and they identify. It's not revolutionary, it's not socialist. Get the fuck over yourself. Get the hell over yourself. Call people what they want to be called. It's not revolutionary to misgender random poor working class people. It makes no motherfucking sense. You're not sticking it to the man, you're sticking it to other African people, regular ass African people. So we have to transform the ways we relate to each other interpersonally, not just relationships where women and children exist to serve men. That's just not going to work. As we are fighting to transform society, we have to transform the ways that we relate to each other on a fundamental level. We have to unpack at every level the shit we have been taught to internalize about African women and marginalized genders and about African men. We have to change the way we treat each other. That is part of the revolutionary struggle. That is why we work so hard, why we're inclusive in our language on this program, why we talk about women and marginalized genders, why we respect pronouns, why we are working more and more and more to address ableism, because we understand that all of these intersecting oppressions were given life and power by capitalism, exist to prop up capitalism. In order to destroy capitalism, we have to work through that shit. How to work through it. So all these people, there's people who believe that the class struggle is solely waged on an economic level, and those people are wrong. The class struggle is waged across all sectors of society. A revolutionary struggle is waged across all of these intersections. It is not a distraction. It builds a stronger and more unified movement where every single person that is involved feels safe and feels like they have a place and a role. It's so much better. It's so much better when you just respect people. That makes them want to join you. And when you're just like, I don't give a fuck, I'm going to shit on you because you're a single mom, I'm not going to respect your pronoun, it lets them know that any revolution you lead is not going to liberate them. So I just wanted to say that revolution is not just about transforming society, it's about transforming how we relate to each other, transforming how we treat each other. And that means letting go of all that shit that patriarchy and triple oppression imposed upon. And I just want to conclude with first saying that African women must realize that we have the right and the responsibility to participate in the struggle for our people's right to self-determination and our struggle for liberation. Do not let anyone tell you a revolution is a man's job. If men could do it alone, they would have been done that shit. Nope. There's never been a revolutionary struggle where women were not also on the front line, fighting side by side, including in the armed part. We have a right to be in this struggle. We have a right to lead in this liberation struggle if we want to. We have the right to choose the role that we play. We have the right to show up. We have the right to engage in struggles over ideas without being made to feel dumb or like we should be quiet. We have the right to be our full selves. We have the right to be hoes, single mothers, sex workers, and still be revolutionaries. We have the right. Don't let anyone tell you need to take a back seat. Don't let anyone tell you that revolution is men's work. It's straight up not. They can't do that shit by themselves. They need us. They need us, just like the planet needs all genders to make life. All genders are required to make life on this planet, not just men. So participation in the struggle for African liberation is part of the history of African women, and I just want to briefly share some examples of revolutionary African women. First, I already mentioned at the top of the show, ancestor Justina Machel from Frelimo, revolutionary African woman who engaged in the armed struggle against Portuguese colonialism in Mozambique. We also have the example of Carlotta of Cuba, one of the women that I look up to the most, someone who I consider like a personal hero. Carlotta of Cuba led a revolutionary enslaved African uprising under Spanish colonialism in Cuba, alongside a trio of other women, enslaved women. The uprising lasted for a year. They struck terror into the hearts of those colonizers. They organized it using talking drums because they could communicate with African people using the drums, and the colonizers would not understand it. And so, yeah, she led an enslaved African uprising across Cuba that lasted a year before she was captured and killed. And there's a statue of that woman in Cuba to this day, because Cuba is a revolutionary island. Cuba is an African nation. Argue with yourself. And so Cuba celebrates revolutionary leaders instead of slave owners like the United States. And then also another cool fact about Carlotta is when the revolutionary struggles against colonialism were waged throughout Africa in the 20th century, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, anti-colonial organizations that were waging that struggle, particularly against apartheid in Southern Africa, called out to the world for help. The United States government heard the call and traded with the apartheid government of South Africa. Israel heard the call and sold the apartheid government of South Africa nuclear weapons during the anti-colonial struggle. But Cuba heard the call, and Cuba was like, word. Cuba had sent hundreds of thousands of doctors and soldiers and teachers alongside material resources like weapons and money, and aided the anti-colonial struggles throughout Africa, helped stop the spread of apartheid in Southern Africa. And guess what they called that mission in Southern Africa? They called it Operation Carlotta, after Carlotta of Cuba, that led that enslaved African uprising in Cuba during Spanish. Because Cuba understands how that revolution happened. Cuba understands the role that revolutionary African women and African people played in its revolutionary struggle. And so Cuba was like, whenever Africa calls, we will answer. And that is true to this day, because Cuba is a revolutionary nation and Cuba is an African nation. And like I said, argue with yourself. Are you mad about that? I don't care, because I will always show up for Cuba the way Cuba showed up for Africa. Other examples of revolutionary African women, as previously discussed on the show, Mama Winnie Mandela, one of the only sellout members to survive non-sellout members of the ANC. Winnie Mandela continuously struggled as a member of the African National Congress against the oppressive system of apartheid under the European settler government of South Africa. In 1963, this woman suffered so much repression for fighting for her people, and she never backed down. In 1963, she was placed under a banning order for 5 years. She was banned from her own neighborhood by the apartheid government for 5 years. She was held again in prison in 1969 for 491 days, and after 5 months was charged on the Suppression of Communism Act, again by that apartheid government. She was then tried in 1970 with other members of the African National Congress and served 5 years under house arrest. In 1976, after her release from that detention, she stated, "We are gathered here not only to discuss common problems, but also to rediscover ourselves, our dignity, and to instill in ourselves self-reliance and self-respect." At the time, she was pregnant when she gave that statement in 1976, but she still participated in a massive women's anti-pass demonstration. So Winnie Mandela is someone who dedicated her life to the struggle against settler colonialism in South Africa and Tanzania, who dedicated her life to the liberation struggle of her people, and as a consequence suffered imprisonment, suffered torture, suffered separation from her husband and her children, suffered all kinds of demonization in the press, including in the United States, and she still refused to back down. She still aligned herself with the masses of poor and oppressed African people throughout the continent. The day she died, she showed up for us. No matter what kind of shit she got from the ruling class and from the colonizer, she showed up for us. So Winnie Mandela is absolutely an example of a revolutionary African woman. And lastly, Tiwa Gomes, who was a leader of the PIGC, who was on the front lines of the armed struggle against Portuguese colonialism in Guinea-Bissau, and who is now head of UDAMU, which is the women's wing of the PIGC. Just a couple of examples of revolutionary African women who occupy positions of military leadership, who occupy positions of political leadership, who dedicated their lives to the liberation of their people, no matter what kind of consequences they faced. That was just 4. There are hundreds, if not thousands more. Thousands more who we don't even know most of their names, because that is how African women, that is who we are meant to be. That is the example that we should live up to. We should not seek to be a Kamala fucking Harris. We should not seek to be a Michelle Obama. Sometimes people are like, why should Michelle Obama get smoked for what Barack Obama did? Man, if you stayed married to a man who installed military bases across the African continent, who drone bomb wedding parties and markets, who killed people, dozens of people from the sky without due process, and then said he was good at it. If you can see a person who overthrew governments, turned Libya into a failed state, if you can see the person you're married to doing all of that shit and then still stay married to them, and on top of that, fucking do stump speeches for the Democratic Party, we're being like the nice auntie. If you could do all that, then you are as big a sellout as he is. You see that shit and you approve of it. And you build it up and you back it up. So fuck Michelle Obama. I don't want to be her. I want to be Carlotta. I want to be Winnie. I want to be Tiwa Gomes. I want to be Mauna Coyote, one of the founders of the AWRU. Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, Condoleezza Rice, Liz Thomas Greenfield. Who's that lady? Gary Washington, who's a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. These are not the revolutionary African women that I look up to. These are women that are a problem, who are going to have to choose a side when the revolution comes. And if they don't choose our side, they can fall with the system. I look up to Carlotta. I look up to Winnie. I look up to Jose. That was the PE section. I feel like I did that. No, it's 12:55. It was all right. It was a little long, but we'll see if I can wrap up the rest of the show in a timely manner. So next, we want to do a couple of promos for some things that are happening within the movement this week. First up, if you have not purchased my comrade's book, Ajamu's book, A Guide to Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, rectify that. Get your life together. You can buy the book on Amazon. It is less than $10. I believe it's like $8. And it is a step-by-step guide to organizing revolutionary community defense programs in your community. Are you trying to start a cop watch? Are you trying to start a community garden like us? Are you trying to organize for community defense? Are you trying to organize systematic transformative justice for your neighborhood? Then buy that book, because it tells you step by step how to build a program like that. Even if you've never done it before, I guarantee you, if you read that book, you will know when to start. So I'm just going to put the name of it in the chat, and I encourage folks to check that out. And then also, this past Sunday, the editorial team of Hood Communists, which is a revolutionary African nationalist blog, were featured on Ajamu's program talking about revolutionary organizing. And you can view the video of that panel, if you missed it, on the APRP YouTube channel. Let me see if I can find that link and put it in the chat. But I encourage you to check out that panel. International. Can't find it. I don't know the name of the APRP International. Yeah, I'll find it and put it in there later. But yeah, if you are already subscribed to the APRP International YouTube channel, you can find the video of the Hood Communist panel on our Ajamu's program from this past Sunday on that channel. And I will also share that on the APRP New Mexico Facebook page after the show. Speaking of Hood Communists, like I mentioned, hoodcommunist.org is a revolutionary African nationalist blog that was 2 years old this year. It has comrades on the editorial board from the APRP, as well as Black Alliance for Peace, Black Hammer, and the Odima People's Progress Party. We are wildly popular. We are also controversial because we are uncompromisingly anti-imperialist, African-centered, and socialist. And for that reason, Twitter.com decided they have had quite enough of us on their platform. They're like, revolutionary, anti-imperialist, socialist, Africans. So they banned us. They let us know yesterday that we are permanently suspended from the Twitter platform. I find it kind of flattering. They like got us the fuck up out of there. They're like, this is too hot for this platform. You cannot use it anymore to spread your commie propaganda. But we're gonna keep it moving, regardless of whether or not we're allowed to speak on these capitalist controlled platforms. We have our own platform, hoodcommunist.org. There were 6 new articles published today at hoodcommunist.org, and you should read every single one, and you should share it. Share it. Don't let Twitter decide what kind of political thought is going to be disseminated. Do not let Twitter control who is allowed to speak and on what. Absolutely not. If you support revolutionary African politics, if you support revolutionary socialist and anti-imperialist politics, then you should read Hood Communist and you should share each and every one of the 6 articles that was published today. There's one about the idea of a strong black woman and why that's actually harmful to African women. There's another one talking about why Bobby Wine met with Juan Guaido. Bobby Wine is one of the presidential candidates in the election in Uganda. He's trying to push out Museveni, but in the course of that campaign, he made some questionable decisions, like calling for U.S. sanctions on Uganda, meeting with the U.S. ambassador, meeting with the European Union. And he also sat down with Juan Guaido and compared the struggles of Uganda and Venezuela. Juan Guaido is, of course, the random ass guy that declared himself president of Venezuela. No one knows who the fuck that is in Venezuela. They're like, what? Who is this man that says he's our president? But the U.S. government, including both President Trump and President Biden, as well as many members of U.S. Congress and many European countries, have backed the fake-ass self-declared presidency of this man, Juan Guaido, because they want to push Maduro out because Maduro is a socialist. So Bobby Wine met with this person who declared himself president of Venezuela, and a comrade from the APRP is breaking down why that might have happened. We also published an interview with Adama Baraka of the Black Alliance for Peace. He was interviewed by Margaret Kimberly, who is a writer for Black Agenda Report and another member of Black Alliance for Peace. And in that interview, Adama Baraka breaks down why, in order to understand fascism as a political movement, we have to look at the history of colonialism instead of centering Europe and Western-centric analysis. Because if you look at the history of colonialism, you will see that all of the fascist tactics that are feared by first world nations, by global north nations, were first carried out during the colonization of Africa and during the colonization of Southeast Asia and the Western Hemisphere. All of the shit that they're afraid of coming home under fascism, they did to us first. And that's what Adama Baraka is talking about in that interview that we published on Hood Communist today. We also have a really cool article about city planning and whether it fits in society after the revolution. And we have a sure to be controversial article about China and Africa. I'm very sure that people will have strong opinions about that. Check it out. And then the last article we published is from Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, calling for a national day of action in solidarity with prisoners' resistance on August 21st and September 9th. You can check out all the details of that call to action from Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, as well as the rest of the articles I just described at hoodcommunist.org. Read, and then share those articles. Again, do not let Twitter decide who is allowed to speak. You want that dude Jack, that motherfucking yuppie, to say what is okay to say and what is not? No. Read the articles and then tweet them. And share them on Facebook, email them to your comrades, and read them in your discussion circles and reading groups. Share. What else am I doing? Oh yeah. So I mentioned Black Alliance for Peace, Adama Baraka and Margaret Kimberly are on the blog this week, but also Black Alliance for Peace has called for an international day of action on Afghanistan. And to explain what that means, I have a brief video of Adama Baraka explaining it. I'm going to switch the screen.
May 1st is the deadline to bring U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. As part of the negotiated agreement between the U.S. and the Taliban to end the U.S. war on that country. However, we see that already the Biden administration is doing everything in its power to undermine that agreement. Therefore, it is imperative that the public hear that this is happening and that the Biden administration feels the response from the public calling for that war to be concluded. Therefore, the Black Alliance for Peace is organizing an International Day of Action April the 8th to bring public awareness to what is happening with the undermining of that peace process. So join us, help us in this activity. Go to the blackallianceforpeace.com/day of action on Afghanistan. There you can download social media graphics. You can find materials to write op-eds, letters to the editor, to organize teach-ins. Use hashtag Mayday Afghanistan to tweet out on that day. We have to bring our voices to the table. They need to know that the public in this country and globally wants to see an end to the quagmire that is Afghanistan. Help us. Join us April the 8th. Let your voices be heard in the war in Afghanistan. May 1st.
Cool. So like I mentioned, that was a Jama Baraka of the Black Alliance for Peace, an anti-imperialist coalition of African organizations and revolutionary organizers united against U.S. imperialism. And the Black Alliance for Peace has called for an International Day of Action on Afghanistan. May 1st, 2021 is the deadline for the United States to pull its troops out of Afghanistan per the U.S.-Taliban agreement, also known as the Doha Agreement. And so the Black Alliance for Peace wants to push the Biden-Harris administration to abide by the terms of this agreement brokered in 2020. They are demanding, and we, alongside them, are demanding that the United States end all involvement in Afghanistan, pull out all of its troops, and let the people of Afghanistan determine their collective fate. For more information on this International Day of Action on Afghanistan, check out the link that I just dropped in the chat. And shout out, as always, to Black Alliance for Peace, one of the frontline organizations in the struggle against imperialism, in a sea of chauvinists, in a sea of opportunists, in a sea of liberalism. Black Alliance for Peace is principled and focused on the struggle against U.S. imperialism. Next part of the program, I just want to briefly talk about some of the work that we are doing here in occupied Tiwa territory as APRP New Mexico. First up, as announced on the previous episode of the show, we are starting a community garden and a meeting space project. The garden is going to be located at Avenida Cesar Chavez and Arno, that lot just behind the Soul supermarket. We want to build a Pan-African community garden that is open to the neighborhood, that is a meeting space for the APRP and that community in that area. We are organizing a cleanup day because it's a lot, just an empty lot at this point, and we have to build it up from scratch. And so there's like a lot of trash on it and stuff. And so we have organized a cleanup day on Sunday, April 18th from 2 to 5 p.m. We are asking the community to join us to help prepare the lot for building some beds and planting some trees. We're going to be talking about the project, why we are doing this, and how it fits into the struggle to build for Pan-Africanism here in Tiwa territory. So please join us with your work clothes on at Sunday, April 18th from 2 to 5 p.m. on that lot at the corner of Avenida Cesar Chavez and Arno Street. We will have snacks and water for you, as well as APIP propaganda, and we look forward to meeting you. And we're also going to be, of course, advertising that event on our social media platforms, on our Instagram and on our Facebook page, which you can find it at AAPIP New Mexico. And we are going to canvas. We're going to be knocking on doors and handing out flyers in the community. So if you see us, say hi. And also please come through Sunday, April 18th from 2 to 5 p.m. Also, this coming Saturday, the Pan-African Film Series returns. We do the Pan-African Film Series on the second Saturday of every single month. We have been doing it, I think, for like 3 years straight in New Mexico because we're awesome. So the next one is this coming Saturday at 2 p.m. That's the second Saturday of April. And we're going to be showing a double feature about Assata Shakur, former member of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army, currently living in safety in revolutionary Cuba. We're going to show a news report from the day she was broken out of prison by her comrades in the Black Liberation Army. And it's hilarious. Like, these pigs do not know what to do. They're like, where the hell did she go? Like, how did this happen? Like, they're so confused. And it's amazing. Because you know she's free and she's going to stay free. And so you're just like watching them walk around, like befuddled. I just find it very funny. And then we're also going to show her an interview of her in Cuba, where she's talking about socialism, she's talking about internationalism, and she's talking about why Cuba is fucking amazing. So tune into that Saturday, April 10th at 2 p.m. Mountain Time for that double feature, and then a discussion facilitated by myself, by Monica, who you have seen on the program before, and by our comrade Kendra, who you have also seen on the program before. That's this Saturday, 2 p.m. Mountain Time for the Pan-African Film Series. And lastly, we have been delivering care packages to elders every single Saturday for over a year. For over a year, we've been doing this. Every Saturday afternoon, we deliver packages of food, cleaning supplies, medicine, and masks to African elders in our communities, as well as political education. Like, we share communist articles, we share APRP articles, we share flyers and pamphlets and stuff about Pan-Africanism and socialism. So we do that every Saturday afternoon. And if you know of an elder, an African elder in Albuquerque or the surrounding area that would need support in that way, let us know. Hit us up. Message us at APRP New Mexico on Facebook and Instagram, or email us at aprpnewmexico@gmail.com. And we will get them a package on Saturdays. That's going to continue indefinitely. So now let's move to the closing. Only 8 minutes over an hour. Not bad, not bad. So during this segment of the show last week, I talked a little bit about the George Floyd trial and how we can never hope to find justice as colonized peoples, as African people, within a system that is built on our backs, that was built with our exploitation. Like, no matter what the outcome of that trial is, it's not going to represent justice or an advancement and liberation for African people. They're also very clearly scapegoating Derek Chauvin. They're acting like that man was an outlier and not someone who was enabled precisely by the structure by which he was. Yeah, like all the cops are like, I was just shocked. I can't believe he did that. Like, that's wrong. Like, they're just throwing his ass under the bus so that they can like get rid of one and then keep the whole murderous machine going. Like, that's clearly what's gonna happen. Clearly what's gonna happen. He's not a bad egg. He is extremely representative of the system of criminal justice in the United States. He's extremely representative of the police in the United States and the police in any kind of settler society. But they're gonna let his ass be scapegoated because they figure if we can just lose one, keep going, that'll be fine. But so that's what we talked about during this segment on the last show. But on this one, I want to talk about the AstraZeneca vaccine and how it is being distributed throughout the global south, while doctors, an increasing number of doctors and studies have found that has been linked to blood clots in people under 30. A Reuters article was published this week that had included a recommendation from doctors in Britain who said Britain should give... Second, I'm trying to find the article so I could put it in here. Doctors in Britain said that Britain should give an alternative to the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine to under 30s where possible due to a vanishingly rare side effect of blood clots in the brain. And this was Britain's Vaccine Advisory Committee speaking on Wednesday. Here is this article where this is discussed. And a really important thing to know about the AstraZeneca vaccine is what I'm about to read. So this is from Quartz, and I'll share this article too. So while wealthy countries chase supplies of Pfizer and Moderna's highly advanced mRNA vaccines, Oxford AstraZeneca's jab is set to take over the world. By the first half of 2021, about 340 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine will be distributed to 136 countries through COVAX, a platform led by the World Health Organization and Gavi, an organization that grants developing countries access to vaccines by subsidizing their costs. By contrast, the coalition will only distribute 1.2 million Pfizer vaccines and only 18 countries will receive them. So the AstraZeneca vaccine was distributed to the global south. And the reason for that is because the United States and Europe and Israel bought up vast quantities of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. So the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine was the only thing that these countries could get. Global South countries, like countries in Africa, Central South America, and Southeast Asia. This is the only vaccine those countries could get. And now they're finding this vaccine that was distributed throughout the global south has a chance of causing blood clots to people under 30. Blood clots in their fucking brains. So the vaccine that the poor part of the planet was left with has been found to cause fucking blood clots. And they gave the global south hundreds of millions of doses of this motherfucking vaccine. Can you tell I'm mad? Can you tell I'm angry? Because people, man, the way these vaccines have been discussed and like rolled out is like so emblematic of how fucked up and stupid capitalism is. Or ridiculous. How fucked up and ridiculous capitalism is. And the reason I'm saying that is because the US and Europe bought up with their vast wealth that they stole from the global south, bought up vast quantities of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, created a situation where global south countries around the world were not going to be able to vaccinate their entire populations until like 2022, 2023. And as this was happening, there was like a discourse unfolding within first world nations and also in Africa, among African people, about how we don't trust this shit. They keep saying it's safe. They keep saying there's no side effects. They keep saying, like, you know, get it, even though it openly admitted it's new technology. So people were skeptical, especially given the history of medical racism, the history of medical testing on African colonized populations. We were fucking skeptical, and we got shit on. In Africa, we were skeptical. In the United States, we were skeptical. Throughout the diaspora, we were skeptical, and we got shit on for that shit. We were called anti-vax. We were called anti-science. Now, come to fucking find out, the AstraZeneca vaccine that y'all fucking hoisted on Africa after your raggedy ass countries bought up the first two causes fucking blood clots. You fucking talked all motherfucker like for a year about how it was perfectly safe and how anyone that was skeptical was stupid and anti-vax. And now look what the fuck. Look what the fuck. We were simply looking at history and y'all were like, how dare you're anti-science. And now look what the fuck. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. How do you buy up all of the doses of the first FDA approved vaccines and then leave the global south with this vaccine that causes fucking blood clots? You're giving it to kids and it might give them a blood clot in their brain and you can't even see that. Like, it's not even being discussed in like mainstream media. It's just so frustrating. It's so frustrating that this is how this is unfolding. And then meanwhile in the United States, the US government is bragging about, 100 million people vaccinated, and they're clearly just saying, like, we're going to let COVID spread out of control. We're going to let the deaths and the cases go up. But as long as we're vaccinated, we can be said to be dealing with it. So we're living through a moment. I saw a doctor friend call it the fourth surge, the fourth COVID-19 surge. We're living through a moment where, like, cases are not going down. Cases are actually going up. Deaths are going up. But a lot of people are vaccinated. And the US government's like, we did it. Like, we did it. Like, they're treating the vaccine like a magic fucking bullet. Meanwhile, under the rug, there's, like, all these complications being discussed. Not just with the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's kind of being, like, swept under the rug. Or they're acting like it's rare. Or it's, like, not a big deal. It's just very, like, it makes you think about, like, how Cuba, from the very beginning, was like, oh, shit, this is very contagious. It's very dangerous. Let's lock down. Let's pay people to stay home. Let's, like, make it possible for them to quarantine and then figure out how to develop vaccines and then test them safely and then get them out in, like, on a reasonable timeline. Meanwhile, in the United States, we were, like, shut down for, like, a month. And they opened everything back up and they're like, you're on your own. May the odds be ever in your favor. The poorer you are, the more fucked you are. Like, that's just how it was. And it's just, like, this could have went down so differently. And now people are, like, acting like it's over. And meanwhile, the cases are going up and the deaths are going up. And the complications are emerging with the vaccines. And it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. And as always, Africa and the global south gets the shortest possible end of the stick, the shit-covered end of the stick, because that is how capitalism works. That is how imperialism works. So, yep, the AstraZeneca vaccine has been found to cause blood clots in people under 30, and it has been overwhelmingly distributed to the countries of the global south, such as nations in Africa and Central and South America. That's really some shit. Really some shit. Anyway, read Hood Communist. Every single Thursday, we publish new articles at hoodcommunist.org, so please check those out. And please make sure you share them and help us get more eyes on that revolutionary African content. Next week on the program, Thursday, 12 p.m. Mountain Time, we are going to be talking about the Venceremos Brigade. The Venceremos Brigade is the solidarity delegation to Cuba. Is actually how I went to Cuba a year ago. 2 years ago. God, this pandemic like stole a year. 2 years ago, I went to Cuba. So we're going to be talking about the history of the Venceremos Brigade and the necessity of revolutionary solidarity with Cuba. If you are listening to this program, you are hearing me speak, I encourage you to join an organization fighting for justice. If you're an African person, please join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We welcome you regardless of your gender or sexual identity or ability or anything. Your age, we have folks who are like 70s. We have folks who are like 80s. All African people are welcome in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, except for class traitors. So please contact us at apripnewmexico@gmail.com if you're interested in joining the APRP. If the APRP is not for you, find an organization fighting for justice and join the organization. The organization you want to see does not exist, then start the organization you want to see. Ajamu's book will help you figure out how. Once again, my name is Onya Sanwu. I am a cadre with the All African People's Revolutionary Party and the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. This has been Weekly Pan-African News. Stay ready for revolution.